Madam President, thank you so much for your time, for being here today, and welcome to Washington.
Thank you.
I want to start by establishing some of the basics when it comes to the story of Georgia and your personal story. Georgia has gone through difficult times. I have been seeing you visiting this town multiple times. When you had a palace, you had some sort of ceremonial power at that time. But this time, you don't have a palace, but you have more power. It looks like you represent bigger, wider, larger mandate. Could you please describe that mandate at this point?
That mandate is the mandate of the people that has been on the streets for now 2 months. And people that have been on the streets not only because the elections were rigged and because there was clear Russian interference in the elections, as it has been the case with other countries close to us like Romania or Moldova. But because the government that was issued of these rigged elections without mandate, we're talking about mandate, tries to take Georgia back to Russia. That's the sense of the decision of the 28th of November. And that's what really provoked this massive protest on the streets, because Georgians, each time their independence is at stake, the future of their country, that is something that they do not accept.
Mm-hmm. And this story goes back to even before, a year before election, when they pushed
2 years.
for 2 years.
2 years.
First time they tried to push.
If not more, but 2 years very clearly.
Right. They tried to push Russian law at that time. They failed. And then they returned back, revisited that wrong decision again. The other side of the story, the Russian dream, Georgian dream, they have been so eagerly trying to, as you mentioned, that push Russian propaganda in the country that has been occupied by Russia. Why?
He's occupied.
He's
currently occupied.
Why would they do that?
That's a question you would have to ask them, because clearly if they had not done all of that, they had quite some chance to still win the elections after being in office for 12 years. What really created the loss of confidence of the population in them was the Russian law, and the other Russian laws that were pushed at the time was the anti-European and anti-American rhetoric, very aggressive. If one reads again the Ivanishvili speech or the Prime Minister's speeches, it's really a declaration of war on our closest partners, those countries that have been supporting Georgia since its independence in 1991, constantly. Georgia is the one biggest recipient per capita of American aid over these 33 years. So it's not comprehensible to the Georgian population why suddenly you wage such a rhetoric against your partners. It's not comprehensible why you turn to China with a strategic partnership and you lose, meanwhile, the strategic partnership with the United States, which Armenia is taking up. So all of that doesn't make sense. So there is a very big reaction of the whole of the population, because what we are seeing is something that we have not seen in the country for many, many years, maybe at the time of the independence and even then, which is a movement that has reached in all the cities of Georgia, a movement that encompasses all segments of the population, which touches business. Even the church has been witnessing the same type of reactions within a very loyal institution that generally does not distance itself from the authorities. That's very traditional in Orthodox countries. So all of that is showing that we are in a very different situation, because it's the central issue, the crucial issue for Georgia, which is independence, which is at stake.
So what I'm hearing, Madam President, is that here's another country, success story for the wider region, that then there's another regime, Russian regime in the region, that uses democratic means to come to power to be there for 12 years. And after 12 years, they refuse to take the exit door, and they try to instead steal the future of country's democracy to secure long-term their presence. Is that the case?
It's not only a question of their power. It's part of the story. Yes, probably the people that are in power wants to stay in power. They have many benefits. Corruption has reached new heights in the country. So they don't want to lose that power. It's very clear. But it's more than that. They are submitted to Russian strategy and to Russian policy. And that's why there is such a strong reaction. If it were only a political issue, one party doesn't want to concede and stays in power, there would have been reactions, but not of that length and not of that strength. Now it's really a vital issue. Everybody, if you talk to the people on the street, they describe this situation as being defending the future of their country, the independence of the country, and the freedom of the country, which they have won from the Soviet Union 33 years ago.
It's very interesting, Madam President, if I'm hearing again, Georgian people had been for a long time deceived by this regime because they were, masked, if you want, democratic. Exactly. and not only the Georgian people, but there's also European, continent there. And
well, there were two deceptions. One is that it was a regime that pledged to democracy and to the reforms and accepted the recommendations of the European Union, and then gradually moved to a more and more autocratic regime, to a regime that is really in the hands of one person, that is not the formal leader of the country, behind the scenes, but he has been taking all the decisions. So that's one deception. That's Ivanishvili. The second deception is that presenting itself as a pro-Western, pro-European regime, and that's why people voted for this party, which was, if we remember, when they came to power, it was a party that in the constitutional changes of 2016 introduced the article that pledges that Georgia, all institutions have to do everything in their power to pursue the Euro-Atlantic integration objective. They introduced it in the constitution, and that was a choice of the Georgian population to support that program in a way. And that program, to which they gave a mandate clearly, has been completely turned upside down. And suddenly, on 28th of November of this year, after an evolution that was predictable, but 28th of November, the Prime Minister, who is not very legitimate following this election, and who has no mandate to change the orientation of the country, says, I suspend all our paths towards the European Union, which means in turn NATO, Euro-Atlantic, it's everything together. Who gave him that mandate? No one.
But there's sort of now, when you look at the capitals in Europe, and also we're here in Washington, the fact that you are here, they are not. There's a genuine understanding of Georgian fight for democracy right now, and it looks like Georgian people don't often get this credit, but we have to talk about how they saved, Europe from another Orban or another, Russian regime that was using Georgian train towards European capitals, and they got demasked. Now, there is this understanding that, okay, Georgia is being represented by a president at this right now in the inauguration, but now by saving Europe, by saving the Western mindset from Russian regime's disease, now the second phase of this fight is to save Georgia itself from this Russian disease. Can we succeed?
Certainly.
And what is necessary to succeed in this case?
Two things. One is that it's a fight for us, that we have to win. It's the Georgian population, and I think that people are very conscious of that you have to do the job yourself. Nobody else is going to do the job for you, and it's not a job that is going to be done through violence or instability. We have to win over the country through peaceful means, and if you look at the protests, they are extremely responsible, organized, and peaceful. And it shows a degree of responsibility of these people that suddenly show us that Georgia can be organized, which we are all surprised. So that's one part. We have to do our part. The second one is that we need our partners to understand that what is at stake in Georgia, it's not only democracy and which again is ours to defend, but it's really the balance of power with Russia. If Russia has not been able to win in Ukraine, and in fact has lost in many grounds, we don't know how it will be the outcome, but still it has lost. It is no longer the major military power in Europe. It has consolidated NATO. It has not managed to raise in the public opinions of Europe any anti-real war sentiment in the ways that it used to do in the past. So all of that are major defeats of Russia. But if Russia, while not being able to win over Kiev in 3 days, manages to win over the Caucasus without any cost, just because they have a puppet government in Georgia and manage to manipulate elections, then they're going to manipulate elections in many other places like Romania or Moldova or elsewhere, and they will win over influence. So it's really a question of strengths of America. I've heard what is the announcement of President Trump, of the new Secretary of State, and if America wants to be first, wants to be strong, it cannot be humiliated in the Caucasus by a small country of 3.7 million inhabitants, by one man who is dictating his policy and who is serving the interests of Mr. Putin. That's not being strong, that's being weak. So that's why I'm comforted by the idea, but that's a geopolitical fight. The democratic fight is for us. The geopolitical, we're not strong enough. We need the attention and we need the presence, political presence, which means that we need strong statements to say to Russia, hands off Georgia.
Hands off Georgia. Will that be enough? Reaction in itself without action when it comes to telling Russia, hands off Georgia, without action on this sort of
That's
messages.
action. That's action, because the problem with Russia is that Russia was led to think that nobody was going to react, that there was no longer attention, and that's maybe a problem that we had with the previous administration that was taken by other issues, Ukraine, Middle East. So there was not much attention to Georgia. And the impression that it left probably with Russia is that it could start maneuvering. It had a government and leaders of this Georgian or Russian dream that they could use or abuse, on which they have, I don't know what are the links, whether it's compromise or whether it's ideological similarity. But they have that, and they try to use it because they thought that it would not resonate anywhere else much. And for some time they were right.
Makes perfect sense. I have two more questions before I let you go. There's one champion in this town that keeps raising Georgia story, who is actually an American first man, Congressman Wilson. It looks like by inviting you here, he also saved the wrong narrative from finding its way to the inauguration and to American, society. How would you describe what he's doing, and how to make sure that the more Congressman Wilsons are willing to jump in and carry on this torch?
Well, I think that he has understood the picture of what is happening, and is sending very clear messages about what it means for America if China comes and takes over the Anaklia port, which is a negotiation that is underway. I don't know exactly at what stage, because we don't know anything. It's all very obscure. Iran is there, and the Prime Minister has been visiting Iran and sitting next to terrorist leaders. And he has been meeting with the ambassador of China every other day, So all of that is the picture that he describes of Georgia, which is the very clear message to be sent to the new American leadership, that you cannot let that happen without at least noticing and reacting to it. So I think that by that he's clearly very much supporting the Georgian nation, because the challenge today is how not to resume normal relations with illegitimate government, no business as usual, but at the same time not isolate Georgia as a country, as a nation, and not let America be drawn out of this region where are many of tomorrow's strategic trade energy interests. If the projects, the infrastructure projects are continued, and if one doesn't let China come to enter the Black Sea, which nobody needs.
Makes perfect sense. We started off by talking about your mandate and the reality, gravities of the region. But I want to go back to end up with a similar question, but differently. It looks like the Georgian dream, Russian dream / Russian dream, they don't give up. They try to roam around, try to buy influence in different capitals, also different media organizations. My colleagues from Washington to Berlin, from Warsaw to Baku, they face this reality. They see like GD so-called officials showing up in their capitals and trying to, gain, their attention. What would you tell them? You heard statements coming from Baku recently. The so-called foreign minister visited there, and they were talking about how they could align with so-called regional mindset by getting rid of civil society, blah, blah, blah. And what would be your response to them?
I don't respond to them. They already do not govern Georgia anymore. They are closed in behind closed doors. They are not recognized by the most of our partners. It's understandable that regionally, the immediate neighbors, it's a different position, but otherwise there are none of the European partners or the Americans that are recognizing them. But more important, they are not recognized by their own people, and so they are hiding themselves. They have no policy. No decisions have been taken. The only announcement that they make was that they were going to start the court proceedings against the national movement of 13 years ago, which they didn't do for 12 years. And that's their only announced policy for the new de facto government, parliament or whatever, parliament, which is one-party parliament. So I think that we should not pay too much attention, because they have ceased to govern Georgia. What is important now is the structure, the political structures that will be given to the movement that we have, and how will that lead to new elections and to a new stable future for Georgia.
Madam President, I know this is a crucial time for Georgia. Every minute matters, every day matters, and I thank you for being here, not only being here, but being in Washington to make sure that politicians in this town hear about a real story of Georgia. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.